Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to announce to you that I will be the host for the next 3 hours on the web stage of this 7th edition of Programmers Week organized by Cognizant Softvision. I hope you enjoyed all the talks we had until now, and for sure we will not disappoint you for the rest of the day. For those of who you may not know me, I'm Petrache Marin. I'm a community lead in Cognizant Softvision, and I have been in the company for almost 7 years with an overall experience of over 14 years in web development. I would like now to present our next speaker, Vlad Pupaza, that is team lead in our company and one of our community influencers that is helping us with a lot of interesting activities that we're doing in our company. Vlad will talk us today about Next.js, a very interesting JavaScript framework on which even myself, I would like to find out more. So also don't forget to send us your question during the presentation or at the end. Through my connector platform, we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Vlad, you have the stage.
Just 1 second. So yeah, as Peter said, I'm going to talk a little bit about Next.js. And first, I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Vlad Pupaza. I've been working, or at least pretending to do that, more or less for 9 years in this industry. I had my fair share of financial projects, but also e-commerce projects. Mostly, I work with front end, but I also dip my toe from time to time in some backend projects. And overall, I easily get excited, but as easily get bored of a topic. So probably that's why also I have way too many hobbies for my own good. And now let's see what is Next.js. What's a Next.js? And first of all, as Peter said, Next.js is a JavaScript framework. That's kind of the core of it. It's still JavaScript, so don't look at it as something magical over there. If you're watching a tech talk on the website, you're probably familiar with JavaScript. It's also powered by Node. Behind the scenes, everything is done in Node.js. It's built for React-based web application. Basically, this is one of the tools that you could use to take an application that's built in React a step forward. It's also something that's recommended by the React team. And it's also a solution for building pre-rendered web pages. Normally, we tend to build the pages that are mostly rendered on the client side, or even make single application pages. The problem with applications like that is that they tend to be less performant if they become heavy with content, rich with content, and they also are not friendly when it comes to search engine optimization. And you kind of can figure why, because if you are rendering most of the app on the client side, web crawlers will have almost nothing to crawl upon until you actually have the application. And Next.js also offers a plug-and-play development environment. And this is something really cool. So basically, you know that when you start a project with JavaScript, and you're trying to build a web app, there's a lot of setup to be done. There's a lot of setup, starting with editors, starting with tools, starting with bringing everything together. With Next.js, you have code splitting and bundling out of the box. You have Webpack and Babel built in. Those can be customized. You have fast refresh. So that means that when you're making a change in development mode, your app is gonna refresh itself without losing the component state. So that's pretty cool. It's almost without any configuration to be done. So basically, when you create a Next.js app, everything is there out of the box. You don't need to configure a lot of things. You only need to configure if you want custom rules and stuff like that. It also has ESLint built in, and yeah, that's always good to be there. We want our code to be linted, and it also has TypeScript support. I mean, no one's writing plain old JavaScript anymore. And let's see now what exactly it can do, because the scope of this presentation overall is to introduce you a little bit in Next, tell you what features does it have, and give you a high level of how you can use those features and take them to production. So first of all, a core concept in Next.js are pages. And pages are kind of the root of everything here, in my opinion. But they are not that special, to be honest. As I said, this is a React-based framework in JavaScript. And that means that pages are just a React component, nothing more than that, just a React component that is utilized by Next to do some pretty nice stuff. And each page, normally it's associated with a route. So as I was saying, this is a Next.js app won't result in a single page app. So you'll have routing on it. Even with a single page app, you'll have routing on it, but here you don't need to set up anything. You just need to create pages, and each one of those pages will be associated automatically with a route. And by default, all of these pages are pre-rendered. And yeah, as I was saying, we don't want to have client-side rendered applications. We want to pre-render as much as we can before we actually send them to the client. And since we have pages pre-rendered, they are also optimized. So basically, when the client, the browser, will load those pages, they will be loaded with as little JavaScript as possible. And after that, Next does something that's called hydration. So basically, behind the scenes, it's gonna hook all the rest of the stuff that's needed to make the application dynamic and rich with content and interactive and all that nice stuff. Now, I said that with Next, we have routing, and routing is strictly tied to pages. And Next has a built-in file system-based router. That's why I said that basically you can create a file, a page component, and if you store that file in your pages folder from your Next application, it will be instantly routed. So for example, if I have JSX in the folder pages, that JSX called I love my dog, that will become a route on the root of my website, I love my dog. And what that component will render, it will be available on that page. And another thing is that if you have an index file in that folder, that will be instantly assigned to the root of that path. And you can also nest routes, and it's pretty easily. To nest routes, you just need to create a structure of folders. So you will have a folder named pages, and you will have another folder in it called photo album and a page called Batman. And that way you will end up with a route called photo album Batman. And of course, you cannot instantly define all of the pages that you need in an app. Some of them will be tied up with your API, they will be dynamic and all that sort of stuff. For example, if you have a set of products on a site, you know that all of them will be probably based on some product IDs or something like that. So in that case, you could use dynamic routing. And Next offers us a bunch of ways to handle dynamic routes. So for example, I could use this syntax over here to name my file. And in that case, if from the API I'm passing the argument Batman to this component as the page, it's gonna result in a page that is nested in paths, and It's called Batman. So as you can see, it's really easy to work with routes and to create pages. You just create files that are React components, and you store them in folders inside of the pages, and you automatically get routing. You don't need to set up a React router or do anything special to have this setting. And you can also have statically generated routes in advance. And yeah, because we have a router, we also need a way to work with it. And Next offers us two utilities. One is Next Link, and the other one is Next Router. Next Link, of course, is used for navigation inside of the app. And Next Router, it's used to access any information regarding the router. I was talking about pre-rendered pages and the fact that Next will enable us to have pre-rendered pages. What's cool about Next is the fact that we can have a hybrid. We can have a hybrid between statically generated content and server-side rendered content on our application. And basically, we can set up Next to create static site generation. So what does that mean if you're not familiar with the concept? It's basically the fact that each page is generated in advance at build time, and those pages will probably be stored on a CDN, will be cached, and when the user is trying to access anything, it will hit that static page. So yeah, what will that enable us? Our pages will be lightning fast. They will be friendly when it comes to search engine optimization. And yeah, this can be done without data and with data. So if we have some simple pages, for example, a contact us page or something like that, that has static content on it, that doesn't need an interaction with a data source, you can have pages be like that. So those pages will be simply a React component that's not building anything. You can also have pages that are statically generated by using some data. That data will come in as props sent to that React component. And we have some helpers to actually make that happen. And those helpers are two functions. Both of them are async. And one is called getStaticProps. And the other one is called getStaticPaths. So basically, getStaticProps is used to fetch all of the props that are needed for that page to be able to be pre-rendered and statically generated. And in order to have this functionality, when you're building that page in the same file, you also need to export this type of function. And you'll need to return an object containing the full set of props. And whenever you do a build in Next will first trigger this function, will fetch all of the data, and it will inject that data inside of the props passed to the React component. And the other one is getStaticPaths. And as I said, Next enable us to have dynamic routes. And sometimes those dynamic routes have to be statically generated. And in order to statically generate dynamic routes, you need to know the routing structure in advance. So getStaticPaths is another async function that enables us this behavior. Again, you can use an API to get that information. And what you need to do is to return that data in this function. And NextJS, whenever it does a build and it tries to generate that page, it will call this method first and pass that information inside of the props of the component. And the other thing that Next is enabling is server-side rendering. Now, I don't know if you guys ever tried to build a platform that's server-side rendered, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. It starts being fun, but it can be really troublesome at some point. Next can offer this functionality built in, and it's kind of easy to use if you're following some guidelines. And it also has some helpers from it. And one of those helpers is get server-side props. It works in a similar manner with get static props, but if you have this method defined and exported from a page, Next will know that that page is server-side rendered, not statically generated. So basically, you can use one of the other to define what kind of page do you want to have. And since all of these are done at the level of a page, that means that you can have something from both of those words. You can have pages that are statically generated, and you can have pages that are server-side rendered. And yeah, honestly, it's pretty easy without too many headaches way to handle SSR. You don't have to build any server that does this. Next does everything behind the scenes using Node, using the server in Node. And yeah, since I'm talking to you about the fact that using the server in Node, so the difference between static site generation and server-side rendering is the fact that for static site generation, every page is pre-rendered at build time, but on the server-side rendering, a page is pre-rendered when it's requested by a client. So that's the difference between those two. One of them will be there before the client actually goes to that page, and the other one will be provided at the moment where the client is hitting that page. Now, as I said, having something like this in a web app will enable you to have a pretty nice experience when it comes to performance. Your sites will be blazing fast. You will hit probably the new core web vitals that Google is using to determine your SEO viability of the site. And you'll get with something that's competitive on with the rest of the market. Another thing that Next is offering out of the box, it's incremental static regeneration. And I talked a lot about static site generated files. So if you have statically generated files, there's a high probability that a lot of those files will also have to be updated. And yeah, they will be cached. Users will receive the information that's cached, but from time to time, new data will come in. You'll have to rebuild those and serve the new content to the user. And that's kind of pretty easy to set up with Next, because it can be enabled with the revalidate property. And what does this mean? It means that first, for example, a user, when it hits the page, it goes to a product page, let's say it like that, or even a product grid. So you have 3 products in there. The app will serve him the pre-render page that was initially created at build time. Let's say you need to rebuild that behind the scenes after, I don't know, 2 minutes or so. That means that after 2 minutes, the user should probably see the new page with the updated list of products, and that being 6 products. So next time he visits that page, he will see 6 products instead of what he saw before. And the way that happens is that Next will serve first the initially generated page. At 2 minutes, it will serve also that generated page that was initially created at build time. But after 2 minutes, behind the scenes, he will restart the process of regenerating that site, pre-rendering it statically behind the scenes on the server, caching it, and next time the user will hit that link, it will get the new page. And as I said, this is enabled by the revalidate property. And all that you have to do is to return this property from the getStaticProps function that you export from a page and to set the timeout there. That means that after 2 minutes, in this case, every 2 minutes behind the scenes, Next will recreate this page. But I said incremental, and that means that it will recreate only this page. So you can set up custom rules for each page that you have in the application, and you can do this incrementally. You don't have to rebuild a whole app just to show an updated version of a pre-rendered page. Another thing that comes out of the box, and a ton of things come out of the box, in my opinion, but one that it's pretty cool, it's image optimization. And why is it cool? Because images are media files. They are things that normally slow up web pages. And in order to have image optimization in Next, you just need to use the utility Next Image, and instead of using the classic image component, you will use the image component from Next. That's basically a wrapper on what you have natively. And it offers resizing and automatic image optimization out of the box. You don't need to worry about anything. It supports modern formats, of course, where there is browser support. It's done on demand. So no optimizing is done if you don't need it. It's done only when Next considers that the user will need to access this kind of functionality. It also has lazy loading built in. That means that if you have on a page, let's say 100 images, and in your viewport, you're seeing only 3, you won't instantly download and optimize 100 images. It will optimize only the ones that you have in the viewport, and it will do the rest while you're scrolling that page. And it takes into account the core web vitals. So all the resizing and optimizing is done by taking into account cumulative layout shift. And that's something important that's taken into consideration at this moment, starting this summer by Google, when it comes to tagging your page as something that's SEO friendly. And it also has caching built in. So overall, you get up image optimization in your app. You don't have to worry about all of this hassle. It's there, and you just need to use the image tag. And in order to enable all of this, you can use images that are served by the Next application, or you can even use external sources. So you are able to configure an external CDN for all of this. So let's say that if you're using AWS or Akamai or Azure or something like that, you could configure that in the Next config file of the application. Another thing that's kind of a pain point in web application are fonts and script optimization. These are two other things that are slowing down sites. And Next is offering some solution also for those. So for font optimization, by default, everything will be improved in taking into consideration the first contentful paint and the largest contentful paint, other two web vitals. And it's doing that by automatically inlining the CSS at build time. And also this optimization, in case it's causing any problem or you're going to use something else for font optimization, it can be disabled, as most of these features, to be frank. Another thing is that it offers automatic optimization for formats like Google Fonts and Typekit, and they're working with other vendors to add more functionality to this concern. And now Next also has a way of handling this optimization either per page using the head component from the utility Next head, or you could do this at an application level by customizing your document component. A document component being a way to add a specific behavior to the overall Next.js app. So something that lives above the pages. And now going to script. It also offers a utility called Maxscript. And you can use the script component from there. It's a wrapper over the native. It has prop seeding enabled on it. And it also has loading strategy property on it. And that can be before interactive, after interactive, and lazy on load. So that means that as a developer, you can choose what scripts are loaded when. And this is probably most important when you're using third-party scripts that may be needed there, but maybe they are not so important to be loaded when the user actually has to see something usable and interactable on the page. So that way you can choose where exactly do you want to load this, or even if you want to lazy load this and have something that's loaded on only in idle times, in browser idle times. So for example, if you're having I don't know, let's say an analytics or a chat component, maybe you don't need that to be loaded until it's actually in use. Or so, for example, the chat, you will probably have to load it only when the user actually interacts with the chat. Before then, it will always be a component that's somewhere in a corner of the site. And yeah, next is by utilizing these three strategies, he's also doing some behind the scenes guessing of when this is most viable for the content that you're showing in the page to happen. Another thing that Next has out of the box, and it's pretty cool, it's internationalization. And that enables us to have built-in support for internationalized routing. If you're building an app, you're probably not building it only for a region. If you're going at scale, you'll probably have websites all over the world. Every region will have its custom language, its own language, its custom set of properties. The site will look a little bit different. And you need a way to handle all of this. And one way to do it is by using internationalization. And you can do that by choosing between two locale strategies. One being subpath routing, and the other one is domain routing. And what does that mean? Is that you can configure inside of the Next.js config routes based on locales. And for example, with subpath routing, you can configure something that will be like this. Of let's say that the default route is in English, and it's going to be the .com. And that will be the site.com/Batman as a route. And if you also want that site to be available in Romanian for the Romania region, it will be sitename.com/row/Batman. And if you want to have the routing based on domain, you can also do that. It's, again, easy to configure from the next config file by defining basically a JSON, and you can have this done something similar to this. So let's say that you're going to have a site for .com in English, and you can also have a site in Romanian. And when you define this kind of behavior, you can also specify which site, which route, subpath, or domain is actually an HTTP or HTTPS route. And another thing that is happening out of the box is that Next has automatically locale detection. So you don't have to worry about stuff like that, because Next will identify from what region the user is trying to access your site, and it will serve the right route for that region. And it will also automatically add the language attribute on the HTML tag. So yeah, again, a problem that sometimes is hard to solve, but it's built out of the box with Next. It also has built-in CSS support. That means that you can import CSS files in JavaScript if you're using plain old CSS. You can do that at the app level, at the page level, at the component level, so anywhere. It also has Sass support built in, and it works with a wide array of CSS in JS solutions. So you can use stuff like style components, JSS, stuff like that if you want. And yeah, so far I gave you an overall idea of what can be done with Next, what features are there built in, but these are not the only feature out there. For example, if you're using a CMS, a headless CMS, and you want to make content changes into that CMS and render statically generated pages based on that, those content changes, you'll probably want to see that as soon as possible, and you probably want to have a preview of that functionality that you just those changes that you just made. Yeah, it has preview support built in. It can be customized, and it's not that hard. And a lot of other features that are there. But yeah, after you actually start to build something with Next, before you get it to production, you also have to test it. We'll never go to production with a product before you test something like that. And as I said, with every web framework and JavaScript application, when you start to set up your environment, to start building something, you need to do a lot of configuration. And part of that configuration is also to enable testing, because we need to be sure that we are not delivering something broken and that we have a way to have a fast CI/CD pipeline set up. And yeah, what has to be tested? Normally, I would say that we need to follow the testing pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid, we have end-to-end testing. And that doesn't have to be, I don't know, that doesn't have to have a huge amount of tests in it, but it's really, really necessary. And Next.js offers Cypress in order to do something like that. And Cypress can be configured when you bootstrap your Next application, or it can be added afterwards when you actually need it, if you already have a Next.js project started in your on your machine. Also with Cypress, we can also do integration testing. So that's the second layer of the pyramid. Somewhere in the middle, we're going to have more integration tests than end-to-end tests, and those can be done with Cypress. And for the last part, the biggest amount of tests that we need into an application, we will have built-in support for Jest and React testing library. And with that, we can do unit testing. As I said, both of these can be set up when you bootstrap the application or manually later for existing projects. After you're done with testing, you're okay. So now I was telling you that you can do testing. Next.js offers a lot of features. It enables your app to be faster and stuff like that. So probably you'll want to see how you could start building something like this. And yeah, in order to start building something like this, you just need to get your hands dirty, take half a day from your schedule, and start building something with Next. And believe me, it's never been easier to be cool. And I'm saying that because in order to start a Next.js application, you just need Node.js installed on your machine. You need a terminal and a text editor. And we are all developers here, so I bet that all of us have something like this on their machines already. The next step will be to use a utility called create next application. So similar, if you're familiar with React, we have create a React app. Next.off also offers something like that. It's called create next application. And yeah, just use that utility, give it a name to your application, and you can start from there. And if you need the Cypress testing, it has a parameter that you could pass to this utility. If you need unit testing, it has a parameter that you can pass to this utility. And in a couple of minutes, you will have everything set up, and you can start building pages, components, and start making your app come true. After you have, after you run this utility, you just need to go into that folder and to start developing and seeing something on the page. You just need to, in your browser, you just need to run npm run dev. So that will open up a server that's gonna deliver your content locally. And to access your content, you just need to go to your local host on port 3000, and that's it. That's it. That's everything that you need to do in order to get this up and running on your local machine and start playing with Next. Afterwards, what I should suggest you to do is to go to this link over here. It's called nextjs.org/learn, and they have an exercise that you can do step by step in order to go through the experience of creating pages and all of that stuff. And yeah, you're building a page, you set up an app, you created some pages, and now you want to see that somewhere in production, somewhere out there. You want to share this with your colleagues, with your friends, to brag, to tell them that, look, I did something with Next. I used only a couple of hours and I have something that's live out there and can be accessed from anywhere. And to get this baby out there, you could use multiple number of solutions. One of them is Vercel. So Next.js is offered by Vercel. And of course, they also have a hosting solution. Another one would be Netlify. Kind of offers similar functionality like Vercel. And we also have a solution from AWS called Amplify. I would say that Amplify is slightly newer than Vercel and Netlify. So maybe it still needs some extra functionality in it, but basically all of them offer you kind of the similar behavior, and all of them will offer you a really nice user experience, developer experience, and a fast way to get your stuff out there in production. So what can these tools do? They have a CI/CD pipeline that can be customized and set up for your project. It's a plug and play solution. So yeah, setting any of those tools up for the initial run of your app, it's less than an hour, way less than an hour. It offers you hosting. All of them come with their CDN. It also offers domain management, PR previews. That's something pretty cool. So you will be able not only to review your PRs inside of your team, you will be also able to see the result of those PRs on an environment. And you can also choose there, right there, after you've done some testing on it, if you want to promote that PR to a production environment, dev, QA, UAT, or whatever you need. It also has integration with Git, and you can pass environment variables, and it offers built-in monitoring. So all of these tools will give you this. Of course, all of them come with a price. nothing cool. It's free, but you can also use a free version for, I don't know, your entertainment, let's say it like that. Now let's look at some alternatives for Next, because I'm not saying that Next is the best tool out there. And before you start building something for a client or for yourself, always do your due diligence and look out over other tools. And those could be Gatsby, NextJS, Hugo, or even SvelteKit, since I talked about Svelte last year. All of them offer kind of a similar thing, with some pros and cons. So check those also out, see if you like them. For example, Next is built for Vue. Gatsby, it's more for statically generated content and CMS stuff, and not necessarily for server-side rendering. Hugo is built in Go, and SvelteKit is using, of course, Svelte, and that's fabulous. And that was it. Now, if we have some question, I'll be happy to dive into those and try to answer them.
Great talk, Vlad. We have at least, I see 2 questions. Let's take them one by one. So first one would be, could I build an e-commerce application focused on manga using Next.js? Not sure if I'm spelling right manga, but I guess it's a e-commerce solution.
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. Next.js is perfectly set up for e-commerce, and as statically generated pages are the default behavior in Next, those are also something that you would like to have on an e-commerce site. And yeah, they have tutorials regarding this. I also think they have a template that you could use for e-commerce. If you're using Vercel, they also have some tutorials over there for e-commerce. So yeah, of course, that you can build an e-commerce site. Okay. You can use internationalization for setting up locales and all of that stuff.
Sounds very well. I hope, Julian, you get the answer from response. So the next one is from Adrian. How hard is to migrate an existing application to Next.js?
It depends. I would say that it depends on the fact. When you're thinking of what exactly do you need there, if you're looking for having a lot of pages run server-side rendering, then maybe those components that you have will not weren't built with that into consideration. But again, it's not something impossible, and it's something doable, because if you're working with a React application, most of your application is React components. And Next is rendering React components. So that means that you just need to hook up some Next utilities to them, import them, and have fun building your application. So it can be challenging depending on your existing code base, but it's quite doable. And some of it can be even plug and play.
I have a follow-up question here. Are we able to maybe do this migration in multiple steps? For example, to just, let's say, try to migrate a part of the application, a part of the functionalities, and after that to finish the other parts.
I guess so. I guess that you could do that. And that's because the fact that Next.js offers a hybrid solution. So you can have statically generated pages. You can also have server-side render pages, but you can also have client-side render pages. And probably your overall solution will contain something from all of these rendering strategies. So yeah, nothing's stopping you from hooking up your main React component for specific pages and have that run in your application. Or you can even do the this separation at the CDN level, where you can configure some routes on some domains to expose your next app, and the other one to go to the old app that you had.
Sounds very good. Another question from Robert. If you need state management, it's recommended to use Redux, or there is a built-in state management?
It doesn't have a built-in state management, and I say that you could use whatever you want for that. Next doesn't care that much on what state management library you're using. End of it, it's a JavaScript framework that renders React components. So it's JavaScript and React, and it has built-in functionality that's either opt-in or can be avoided. And okay. Yeah, looking at their example and their suggestion, they're mostly using functional components, and they're also pushing towards using React hooks in case you need to give those functional components a little bit more gas.
Okay. Until, I don't know, getting other questions from the audience, I have a few of my own. And since we have a bit of time, I would like to ask you a few things. So I have seen in your presentation about some multiple solutions of getting the next application to the production. Do you have a preference here? Do you have a recommendation maybe?
There's no right answer, in my opinion, for that. It all bottles down to pricing and what you prefer to have in your ecosystem. I don't know, maybe if you have already AWS as a vendor, you would go with Amplify. As I said, all of them will offer you kind of a similar experience, and all of them have the nice features, these nice features built in. I would personally try to go with Vercel, and that's because they are building Next. So if I can work with the same guys that are building the framework, I mean, that's going to be good because I'm going to have access to all of the functionality that framework is offering, but I'm also going to have access to that functionality first. Next.js is a pretty popular framework, so a lot of these solutions have built-in support for it, and they are plug and play. But of course, I always expect from the vendors who is actually building the framework to have the functionality developed first, and only after that, that functionality, new features being adapted by other vendors. And you don't even have to choose one of those vendors to get this to production. You can also build your in-house solution. I mean, you have tools like Jenkins, you're probably already using a CDN, so you can try to leverage that and build your own scripts. End of the day, Next offers a set of node scripts that you can also run from any Docker container on any environment.
Okay. One more related to static site generation versus the server side rendering. I know here might be some debates. What would be the option that you recommend or choose?
As I said before, you're probably gonna have something from both strategies. You're also gonna have a client-side rendering, but it is recommended, if possible, always to try first to have statically generated content, because that's gonna be faster. It's, as I said, that's happening at build time. So when the user is requesting that content, it will get it. When it's happening on the server side, with server-side rendering, the load is taken from the browser and it's put on the server, but you still have to wait for that request to be made to the server and to receive a response to render that page. And on the client side, it's obvious everything is happening on the client, and it's mostly related to what kind of content do you want to render. So, for example, if you know that you're gonna have pages with content that is pretty much static, or it's not updating all of the time, of course, static site generations is the way to go. That content, as I said, it's created at build time. It will be cached, easily cached in a CDN, and will be the fastest solution out there. But if you have content that has to update pretty often, I would go with server-side rendering. That also can be cached, but your caching strategy is way harder to define in a CDN for something like that. And of course, some kind of content, mostly content that is not, I don't know, has some user-sensible information like credit cards and stuff like that. I know if you're on a checkout page, you would never want to store something like that or have something like that pre-built. So that's something that you will probably leave it up for the client to actually render.
Okay. I have one more last question, quick question, and I think if there will not be any other question after that, we can close this talk. So the last question from me would be, how much can you extend Next.js app? I saw that we have a lot of utilities. Actually, where is, let's say, the limit? Because I was inspired by Aline talk from earlier regarding the sky. And where do you see the limits?
I mean, Next.js, when it comes to solutions that are really opinionated and less opinionated, Next.js is somewhere in the middle. So they offer a way of working, but a lot of it is opt-in. And also it's customizable. You can customize it until a specific point, but you cannot go fully custom with anything here. And if you want to build a Next.js app, you still have to follow their routing system and their setup rules. And even for deployment, they have some things that are kind of set in stone for them, or let's say recommended. So it's not fully customizable, but end of the day, as I said, most of it is opt-in, and it's your choice if you want to have a utility that's bringing some functionality there out of the box or not. And it's still JavaScript, and it's still React, and it's still Node. So nothing is stopping you to create some custom scripts behind the scenes that are running and that they are making life easier for you. But of course, even with something like that, if you need something that's completely different from what Next.js is offering, I would suggest that you look for another vendor, because you probably don't need to work with this kind of framework. Okay,
cool. Thank you. And also thank you for answering to all these questions. I think it was very helpful for me and also for the audience, of course. So a few thoughts from you at the end, please.
Yeah, I hope that I spiked your interest, and that you will try to play with it and see how it works. And yeah, as I said, it's only gonna take you a couple of hours. If you have a weekend morning while drinking your coffee, you can easily get a page running in, let's say, production. And yeah, I would like to hear more from you guys related to this topic. Maybe some of you guys are new to this and are going to try it. Maybe some of you are already using this. So if you have any thoughts, let's keep this conversation going. You can also always find me, message me on LinkedIn or other social media platforms over there. And I also would like to ask for some feedback related to this tech talk overall, to this presentation. And in order to access that feedback, you could use the QR code that's on the screen, or you can even use a link that's probably has been sent in the chat on our platform. So hopefully this was fun. It spiked some interest. It created a chain of thoughts and questions in your heads, and yeah, hopefully it was useful, and you had fun being here. And thanks a lot for joining.
For sure. Thank you, Vlad. Very nice talk. Congrats. And see you after a short break with another great presentation that I would say that is continuing in a way what Vlad presented to us. So
Exactly,
take a snack,
exactly.
a coffee, and please come back in less than 5 minutes.
Exactly. I'm gonna be there because what the next presentation topic is kind of tied in with this way of working. So see you there.
See you. Bye.
Bye bye.